Now, the point is, we look at this and hopefully you can see the wildly unbiblical nature of womanhood that is inherent here. Clearly, extra Christian, extra biblical forces are at work here. Stuff is coming in, being borrowed from religion outside of Judaism and the Christian faith, because that's certainly not how women were viewed in God's law. The result is going to be extremely negative. Jerome, one of the, probably the greatest Bible scholar of the late, early period of the church. Again, one of only very few men who could read both Greek and Hebrew with facility, anyways. Jerome encountered a woman named Paula. Paula entered the monastic life under the influence of Jerome after becoming a widow. She had 5 children, one rather young, that she left to others to care for while making a pilgrimage to Palestine, where she visited the recently rediscovered cross, the stone of the tomb, and the manger. In other words, by this period of time, around 400-ish, you already have what will eventually be the very active trade in relics and things like that. But you can see with the early martyrs, when people start collecting bones, personal possessions, pieces of clothing of particularly holy people, there's no foundation for that in Scripture, but it is what we might call a natural element of man's religion. And this starts entering in. And so that grows. The hagiolatry grows. So now you have physical things like the newly rediscovered cross. And of course, Desiderius Erasmus got himself into a lot of trouble more than 1,000 years later by joking about the fact that you could build an entire ship out of all the pieces and splinters of the genuine cross that were then floating around Europe. And he was quite right about that. So anyways, she then went to Egypt and prostrated herself before the Desert Fathers. She returned to Bethlehem and founded there a monastery for Jerome, where she was abbess until 404 AD. She was tremendously generous, giving away all her personal funds and ending up indebting her daughter to a tremendous degree by the time of her death, having borrowed money at high rates of interest just to give it away. Paula became an example of the perfect nun, and many followed in her footsteps. Physically attractive, she did everything she could to hide and deface her beauty. She said, "I must disfigure my face, which I have often against the command of God adorned with paint, torment the body, which has participated in many idolatries, and atone for long laughing by constant weeping." She felt it was her duty to be as non-woman as possible so as to not cause men to stumble. Now, the point is, we look at this and hopefully you can see the wildly unbiblical nature of womanhood that is inherent here. Clearly, extra Christian, extra biblical forces are at work here. Stuff is coming in, being borrowed from religion outside of Judaism and the Christian faith, because that's certainly not how women were viewed in God's law. The result is going to be extremely negative. That's obvious. But the point is, you have men who gain stature, an Augustine, a Jerome, men who gain stature, an Augustine, a Jerome, individuals like this. And once they adopt these perspectives, this starts building up tradition. Men who gain stature, an Augustine, a Jerome, individuals like this. And once they adopt these perspectives, this starts building up tradition. View of woman, view of marriage, celibacy becomes the great source of spiritual power, which of course will become a basis of utter mockery by the time you have the pornocracy in Rome in the 10th century, 9th and 10th centuries, when you have, by the time of Erasmus himself was the illegitimate son of a priest. So when he became a priest, he had to get a special dispensation because he was the son of a priest. Everybody knew that was normative by then. And so you had the theology that said celibacy is the ideal, but everybody knew nobody was doing it, including the Pope. So you put all this stuff together, and this is how tradition builds up. This is how tradition becomes established. And the great, if you want to be a radical, you go, actually, Jerome was wrong on the subject of the perpetual virginity of Mary. He was wrong in his biblical argumentation. He was just plain wrong. How dare you, heretic, burned at the stake. And many people did, actually, even over stuff like that. But it's not like people woke up one morning. And so, this says, every single other Christian is affirmed from the ancient church to the Reformation. That's just simply a lie. But I'm sure this guy believes it. I mean, look at these people. Look, you see some of these zealots out there for these Marian dogmas. They spend their lives reading everything they can get their hands on. And if you find even the most basic positive words about Mary in anybody, they will read into those words entire theologies of bodily assumption and immaculate conception. If Mary is called pure, there's someone who believes in immaculate conception. See? It's happening all the time. YouTube has terabytes of videos from these people. Believe you me, they're there. Nobody just woke up one morning and said, I'm going to come up with a new doctrine. And everybody went, okay. It is this development over time that builds up the layer after layer after layer. So you look at that's why I've said, and you can go back and check these things. I've said this for decades. When you see these pamphlets and tracts and stuff like that say, such and such a doctrine, and it gives a date. Well, like purgatory. When did purgatory start? There is no meaningful answer to that question. You can say this council in the 15th century dogmatizes it, fine, but that doesn't really mean anything because it was functioning before then, and there were disagreements, and in reality, purgatory requires a number of different roots that had to develop first before they could all come together to give you the doctrine of purgatory. And that takes a lot of time. And one early church father over here might have one part of it, and one over here another part, and another guy over here another part. And at any one particular point in time, you may have disparate levels of development on these things in different places in the church.